right, if we'd all rise to say the pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Kelly, would you call the roll?
Michael DeVito.
Here.
James Shiloh.
Here.
Christian Koppel.
Here.
Beth Marie Evans.
Here.
Alex Grados.
Here.
Eric Jones.
Is present.
Alan Zantu.
Present.
Quorum is present.
All right. Good evening. As a reminder, our board governs by policy, which is aligned with state statute. It's essential that our practices reflect these policies, ensuring transparency, accountability, and effective governance. Only in a duly convened public meeting with a quorum present can the board govern as a whole. Where our practices and policies do not meet the current needs of the district, it's our responsibility to amend those policies where legally allowable to better serve our community and align with our strategic plan. Our mission is to empower all learners to succeed in their world. Our vision is to provide an ideal learning experience where students and staff are engaged and want to come back the next day. Our board policies and actions should reflect that mission and vision. The consent agenda is up for approval. The recommended action is to approve the consent agenda as presented. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda, which consists of minutes of regular meeting November 26, 2024, minutes of executive session November 26, 2024, bills payable, and personnel reports?
So moved. Jones?
Second. Koppel.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, Kelly, would you call the roll?
Shiloh.
Yes.
Koppel.
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Grados.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Zantu.
Yes.
DeVito.
Yes.
Motion carried.
All right. The next item on the agenda is the NIA consent agenda. The recommended action is to approve the NIA consent agenda as presented. Is there a motion to approve the NIA consent agenda consisting of NIA treasurer's report, NIA bills payable, NIA personnel report, NIA contract and vendor agreement report?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the NIA consent agenda?
Steve, I was just curious, Hawthorne Associates of Lake County, they do a significant amount of work. It was just a very big building.
For NIA.
Yes.
I didn't look at that, I mean, I can look into it if you like. I don't have any feedback on that. NIA operates separately from the district. I sit on the board, but we didn't meet this month. There was a lot of business, but I'd be glad to follow up with Mr. Malone, who's the director, if you've got a question about Hawthorne.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
I was just curious.
Okay. Yeah.
Any other discussion? All right, Kelly, would you call the roll?
Koppel.
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Grados.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Zantu.
Yes.
Shiloh.
Yes.
DeVito.
Yes.
Motion carried.
The next item on the agenda is audience to visitors. If you wish to address the board this evening, please raise your hand at this time, and when called upon, kindly state your name and address and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Please refrain from mentioning specific names during your remarks, and in accordance with the Illinois Open Meetings Act, the board should not engage in deliberative discussions or take immediate action on items not listed on the agenda. However, we want to assure you that your comments are important to us and will be taken into consideration. Thanks for your understanding. Seeing no comments, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is superintendent reports. Let's see, Steve?
So, first of all, building and department updates have been submitted. You guys have had a chance to read those and walk through those. The one item I'm going to speak about tonight is just a kind of an overview of the budgeting process. And we've talked about this a little bit. I'm going to stand because I talk better when I'm standing up, I guess. Just want to walk through what the budgeting process looks like, in any given year. We're using FY26 as an example, but this is pretty much how it works every year. The first thing that happens is the board officially votes and delegates to the superintendent the creation of the budget for the following year. Well, I don't create the budget. Nicole does that with her office. That decision, though, is made in September for the following year. Okay, so that's really what kind of starts the whole process the year before. In August of the current fiscal year, We present the tentative budget. That's based on work that we've done already in the previous spring, over the summer. We present that to the board for approval. Has to be on display for 30 days. So we watch that timeline from one board meeting to another to make sure that in September, the board approves it within that 30-day timeline. Has to be approved before the end of September by school code. And then we get it filed with the county clerk's office in both DeKalb and King counties. So once the budget is approved by the board, we go right into talking about the tax levy. So in October, the board approves the tentative tax levy. Nicole works on that. We talk about that. We live in tax-capped county. Tax-capped, and Nicole does a better job talking about this than I do. Tax extension is what's capped, not the tax levy. So what's actually extended, given to taxing bodies, including the school district, is what's capped. We have to take things like that into account. We work with the county assessor's office to get an idea of what EAV looks like, what's changed from the previous year to the current year. Nicole builds that levy, presents it to the board in October, and then typically what we've done is ask the board to approve the final levy in November. Has to be filed with the Calvin King counties again in December, before the end of the calendar year. So Nicole also takes care of that. In January, about midway through the current fiscal year, we start reaching out to department chairs, building principals, directors. There are a couple of exceptions. Art, music, I think those are the only two departments that we get their budget recommendations, because those cover the entire district, right? Music and art. So those department chairs give us their budget requests. Other directors, principals, we start gathering that information in January. Part of that is departmental budgets. This is what you had the previous year. Are you asking more for less? Nobody asks for less, believe it or not. If you're asking for more, what's the rationale behind that? We have to take all of those things and then fit them into this pretty significant puzzle in terms of what the requests have been and then what the budget is going to allow us to do. That starts in January and goes for the next couple of months while we're gathering that information, researching kind of the pros and cons of the different requests. And then part of our job is to prioritize what the requests are, weighed against what our financial resources are. So if we know that our budget is X amount of dollars, what can we afford to do and what do we have to say no to? That's one of the things that the board delegates to the administration, is we have those conversations with staff internally. This is what we can afford, this is what we can't. But we don't get all those requests and just sit in our office and make that decision, right? As the requests come in, we have additional conversation. What's, in terms of special education, what's the need, what's the ask, what's the impact going to be on students? And with special education, which is a little bit different, that's federally required, right? So if the student qualifies for services, we have to find a way to work that in the budget. So special education is typically prioritized primarily because those are federally required services that we have to provide if a student qualifies for them. There are always additional asks. We would love to say yes to everybody, but we can't, right? At some point you have to draw a line in the sand, and our commitment, both Nicole and I, has always been to live within our means. We want to provide the best opportunities for our students that we can, but we have to live within our means. Several years ago, the district was deficit spending and had to make significant cuts. It's very painful. It's a very difficult process. I don't ever want to have to live through that again. So we are doing our best to avoid that. But that means having those difficult conversations every spring, letting people know what we can add, what we have the resources to add, and saying no when we have to. Historically, we've made a presentation to 2 members of the board in a district finance committee meeting that's typically happened around April. The request this year has been that presentation gets made to the board, not to that committee. That will change a little bit. And then as the school year winds down, we also know that there are unexpected requests that come up along the way too. So we start asking directors, principals, department chairs, what do you need in January? We're working on that through April. but we know that things pop up at the end of the year. And one really good example is that we may have a family that moves into the school district who has a child with significant special education needs. We didn't know that in April. But in May or June, we have to find a way to make that work. So we know that there are unexpected changes to what's requested and the needs of the students and the staff. So we're weighing that throughout the summer. One of the other things we watch really closely are elementary section numbers. So sometimes you just have a big class of third graders, right? Maybe you know that they're working their way up through the system, kindergarten, first grade, second grade. And then every once in a while, you have a lot of move-outs or you have a lot of move-ins, and that just changes one grade level. And we're constantly, pretty much every year, watching what those section numbers look like. And every once in a while, we have to add a staff member, maybe over the summer last minute, because we've had so many move-ins to keep numbers as balanced as we can. That happens throughout the summer. And then in August, the whole thing starts all over again. We bring the tentative budget back to the board for the current fiscal year. One of the things that I used to remind the board in the future, or in the past, is that we're asking you to approve a budget in August and September that we're going to use for the rest of the fiscal year with a lot of unknowns between September and June. We build in some safeguards, some contingency to take care of issues as they pop up. But it's always our absolute best guess, and then we monitor things throughout the school year. I work closely with Nicole and Nick to monitor those things, but Nicole has many years in the district. He's been monitoring that and kind of used to what might come up, what might not. Every once in a while there's a surprise, but for the most part, you can kind of budget for those things and give yourself a little bit of breathing room. So that's a month-to-month kind of high-level view in terms of the budgeting process, the steps that we work through. I just want to pause for a second and ask if there are any questions from the board.
So from a semantic standpoint, we have a kind of a levy-led budgeting process from the standpoint of the levies established first, because we have to get that documentation submitted so that we collect our tax revenue in, what, July and September, June and September. So we kind of are setting how much money is going to be received and then figuring out how to budget from within that, as opposed to maybe in another business cycle or something where a company might say, here's how much we want to spend, now how are we going to raise that money, right?
The other thing is state funding, and most of our funding comes locally, from local taxpayers. We do get some funds from the state, we do get a little bit of funds from the federal government. That's fairly consistent. State funds have been pretty consistent over the last several years since EBF was implemented. If you went to the joint annual conference, what you might have heard of talk or in certain sessions is that there is a fear that EBF may be impacted in the coming fiscal year. Receipts, if you've watched the state budget, receipts are a little down right now. And the state has to find a way to figure out how to make up, either make that up or cut back. I think I mentioned this last month also. Some of you, I lived through a time when the state just quit paying school districts. It's rarely happen, but it does happen. So those are also the sorts of things that we're planning for. Local property taxes is a huge part of our budget, but we watch those other things as well. But our budget is driven by what revenue we're going to have access to. Eric's point's a really good one. If we decide we want to do more, we can't just go out and try to raise more money. You could if you wanted to go out for a referendum. I'm not recommending that. I don't think anybody wants to do that, at least not right now. But our budget's driven by what are our resources and how can we best allocate those for our students and our staff.
Well, and I raised that just because we had a comment during the last public meeting when we were adopting the levy that was, making the request that we cut back on our levy requests. And I think to your point, we could idealistically show up and say, right, we're going to hold the levy steady from last year or reduce it by X%. But any one of those uncontrollable things that you just mentioned could happen. Bunch of move-ins, we have to hire a bunch more sections, special ed requests, whatever, and now our hands are tied. There's nothing, we can't go back and change the levy after the fact. So it's a complication with that budgeting cycle that we can't control. like other taxing bodies.
Any other questions for me, just about general, this is just kind of high-level general overview about the budgeting process. Anyone?
This is just an overview. It's not, we're not proposing any changes or anything. This is just how it's been and how we're.
Yeah, this is how it's been done, yeah.
No, we'd had a lot of discussions last meeting about that calendar, and so I'd asked
Yes.
Steve to just kind of give a high level for everybody who's newer to the board. You know, what does that process look like?
Welcome tonight, or get out of here tonight, and you have more questions, shoot me an email, let me know, and I can include the question and answer in the update.
One comment I just wanted to make on this as well, I thought just tying things back to policy, a line that I really liked I had to look for is the district's budget, including how, when, by whom it's prepared, how the district's mission and goals are translated, are reflected in a dollars and cents plan. And so, like, a big part of the final budget that the board approves should be a direct reflection of its goals and priorities. And there's a book, Essentials of Illinois School Finance. And in that book, section 23 outlines financial responsibilities of the school board. And in that section, it lists really well desired outcomes and priorities for the budget process. And one of the things that I think really is pertinent, and one of the appendix items is the budget calendar, like what we've recently adopted. But then more particularly, like as we get into April and we get that budget presentation, in terms of prioritization, it'll be really, really important that our goals, what our current goals are, we have a really clear understanding of, and that our policy translates to those goals, and that those goals translate to those budget allocations. So that way it's super clear across all three of those planes to the community on how this board ultimately wants to prioritize resources. So, like, big picture, goal setting is going to be front and center for us in the coming months. And so the budget should be really kind of the second thing to think about as we start getting into those goals, is like how we're going to map that to prioritization in the budget, and how we're going to make sure that, if anything, there's clear expectation for maintenance of the district's financial health relative to those goals. And so if you want to check out like 5 pages is what it is in the Essentials to Illinois School Finance, not the whole book, but section 23 really does, I think, like a nice job of outlining what our role will be in that process as we do that goal setting piece. So that's just something I thought I wanted to tack on to your comments. So then the next item on the agenda is board reports. A little change to board reports. We've got the FOIA report, and any comments on the FOIA report? No? Okay. The suspension report will be able to be accessed in the Diligent portal, so if you guys are interested in seeing that, that's where you can find it. For board, district, and non-district committees reports, I'd say if you guys have any comments, questions, things that might be good for future agenda topics, anything that you want to bring relative to your own respective roles with the district, this would be a great time to let those out.
When you say the suspension reports are in the portal, what exactly do you mean by that?
So the Diligent portal, the one that's public facing, you know, that Diligent meeting, where all the meeting agendas are.
Yeah.
Yep. If you go in there, there will be a section where designated, you'll see suspension reports. In the next month.
There's no report this month,
Okay.
but it'll show up in the board information center next month. It starts showing up there next month.
Anything else?
There was no planning and zoning commission meetings. Not the report. Other than I got my Monday night back. I know.
Nice.
Spartan Senate met, and we had a little more discussion on the student board rep. I know that was in a recent agenda item at our level, but we're, administration's still working on hammering out a proposal on how that would look. I know that was delegated to the policy committee, but I figured I'd give an update. It's still a work in progress. Or administration's working on it.
Citizens Advisory Committee met, and there was, we talked about, a lot about the new building. There was a concern about the food pantry, since it's gonna be moved, that there wouldn't be as much access. And a couple people brought up some good ideas of getting others in the community involved to help deliver packages to people's doors if there was needed, and, yeah, we also, it was mainly about the new building, a lot of introductions, and there was a lot of people there this time, a lot more than I remember being last year. It seemed like we have a larger group, which is good. But all in all, it was a good meeting. I don't think we're meeting again until February. I think it's February 13th.
Is the Spartan Food Pantry an external entity, or is that part of the district?
That's an external one.
Oh,
Anything else? Any other committee, subcommittee?
I think the superintendent evaluation process, we're going to try to set up a meeting maybe in January or February for those of you who volunteer to want to participate, and then obviously always welcome to participate.
Anything else? Okay, so then on to new business, or I'm sorry, old business. We have item 7.01, approval of the 2025-2026 district calendar, second reading. The recommended action is to approve the 2025-2026 district calendar. It's the second time it's coming in front of the board. Is there a motion to approve the 2025-2026 district calendar?
I move to approve the 2025-2026 district calendar.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion about the district calendar?
Since the only significant change, it sounds like, was this a half-day scenario. I guess was staff approving of that? That's kind of like what they were asking for?
I would say it was a combined ask from both admins and staff. Looking for more opportunities for professional development, just to try to squeeze in a little bit more time where we could. So I would say it came from a couple of different angles. But the calendar, not only did I share with the leadership team, so the admins, but also SCHSS I had a chance to look at, so kind of get their stamp of it too.
Thank you. Great.
Yeah.
Just a question, it just popped in my head. If there's a snow day on a half day, is the makeup day also a half day?
If there's a snow day, doesn't necessarily have to be a half day.
Okay.
Because it gets added at the end of the year.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't make it a half day, I'd probably make it a full day.
Okay.
I hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I was just curious. Like,
But,
I've never
yeah.
heard of that happening. I just wondered. Like,
Yeah, we would have to make up the day, whether it's a half or a full.
Sure.
We'd have to figure that out.
Okay.
All right, seeing no comments, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, stands approved. That's everything on old business. We're chugging through here. Let's go to new business. 8.01, approval of resolution to support Vision 2030. The recommended action is to approve the resolution to support Vision 2030 as presented. Is there a motion to approve the resolution to support Vision 2030?
So moved, Jones?
Second, Zanch.
All right, any discussion around approving Vision 2030?
Could there be a little bit more, just what
Absolutely.
it entails?
Yeah.
I've read a
You got
little bit
some
on it.
info?
Yeah.
Perfect, thanks.
So all high level, and then jump in. If you were at joining a conference, you should have heard about something about Vision 2030. Vision 2020 was an initiative planned just prior to 2020. It was about 2015-ish. At the time, school funding was hard to come by. There were cuts, there was proration, and a variety of other issues. And for a long time, several of the state organizations felt like we're always, telling the legislators what we don't want. And multiple organizations kind of came together at the same time and kind of came up with this idea of, why don't we put a platform together to try to communicate what we would like to see instead of always having to say no all the time. So just some information here, kind of referenced. There are 1,000 stakeholders who had input. It's similar to 2020. It was developed by the School Administrators Association, that's the Superintendent's Association, IESBs have been involved, IPA, IASBO, IRS. Vision 2020, the biggest issue was state funding, but it also promoted teacher recruitment policies, college and career readiness, as well as the Illinois balanced accountability model. They've had a huge impact on the state of public education since 2020. I wouldn't say that we checked all those boxes, but I would say because of that initiative, there was a lot of push and a lot of leverage. And legislators in specific, when so many school districts were kind of speaking the same language, so many school districts had approved a resolution supporting Vision 2020, really gave lobbyists in Springfield a lot of power and influence to have meaningful conversations with legislators. So a couple bullets here on Vision 2030. Provides a roadmap to K-12 education in Illinois. It's really important that it shares an articulated or a shared commitment across multiple organizations in the state. There are 4 pillars. I didn't include those here. If you go to the ISB, it's provided information, so is IASA. You can get a little bit more information there. The plan details advancing policy initiatives, legislative and fiscal solutions, leveraging public resources, more local flexibility and leadership, so that decisions can be made closest to home, local control. We've been talking about that for a long time. So as a means to kind of gather some steam and start these conversations with legislators in Springfield as well as other leaders throughout the state, all of those organizations are encouraging school boards to approve a resolution in support of Vision 2030. And the more districts that do that, the more power that lends to the initiative. There's a quick snapshot.
Okay.
Again, glad to answer any questions. And Michael, Eric, anybody else who was at the joint annual conference, anything that you kind of picked up that was particularly meaningful?
I didn't pick. I somehow missed that in its entirety, so I'm not.
They did 4 pillars. It was keeping students safe, keeping high-quality educators in front of students, enhancing post-secondary success, and improving measurement of what is working. That was like they called it the backyard barbecue talk.
Right.
So,
I like the idea of having more at the local level, that's for sure.
I was interested, was there much discussion about like expanding just like school maintenance projects grants, the grants themselves, or Title IV funding?
Go ahead.
So a big piece of it was trying to gain more secure commitment for the evidence-based funding model. That was priority number 1 on the list that they provided. But then they go into more specialized funding and grant acquisition that they're going to try to do. And so there's actually a packet. It's like 24 pages. I can make sure you guys all get it, but the predictable funding under like the section 2 of the packet just basically talks largely about pension reforms, equitable funding sources for capital and safety needs, and then flexibility in terms of interfund transferability. Those are the 4 steps to the financial piece of the pillars that they're working on. So not too much related to grant other than tied to the evidence-based funding and then the property tax relief grant.
No talk about liability for pension reform?
Yeah.
And it fails the brush
Yeah.
back?
Yeah, so again, the big piece too is like they talked about analyzing the tier 1 and tier 2 systems and trying to find a more sustainable, non-locally sourced funding path. But their second pillar was just identify a pension model that could work. So it sounds like it's more exploratory than it is driving at a plan.
The one thing that I thought it had a dollar commitment or a percentage increase in EBF annually, but I thought that was the only number that was in the proposal. Or the,
Are you talking about the 90% of the adequacy target? It was to ensure all students
no,
receive support.
I thought it was like 300 million additional per year for.
Yeah, that was just to keep at the statutory minimum.
Yeah, just
for each
it's
grade.
basically
Yeah.
saying we want to maintain what you said you're going to give us. I mean, it's nothing super
Yeah.
ambitious here, but maybe it is for Illinois. I assume based on what Sue talked about earlier, not receiving payments.
Any other discussion around this? Questions?
So this resolution, what impact does it have specifically for us? Is it just kind of like we're throwing our hat in, or?
So so like boards, a mechanism boards can do is they can adopt resolutions to show support. So that's all this is. It's just a, hey, we're with you. But we have no actual commitment beyond saying we are committed. There's no monetary ask or anything.
Just voicing support.
Formally voicing support. Just effectively our relationship with IASB, like when we do the delegate assembly votes, like we're just voicing our support for those resolutions, and then those resolutions become a lobbying effort for IASB. So. Okay, any other discussion on that?
You can read more at IllinoisVision2030.com.
That's right, hold up the QR
That's where that
So there's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, it stands approved. Okay, the next item on the agenda is item 8.02, approval of Southeast Elementary School Improvement Plan. Maybe an explanation on this one.
Yeah, so glad to do that. Last year, Southeast, so let me back up a little bit. Every year, the state of Illinois, based on a variety of factors, characteristics, designates every school as either underperforming, what's the other one, comprehensive, targeted commendable, and then exemplary. Glad to say that all of our schools are commendable, received a commendable designation this year. Last year, Southeast received a targeted designation. So what comes with that are some funds to support the school to try to make some changes to support, to address needs identified in the designation process, probably the best way to put it. Last year, Southeast was designated as targeted. This year, they're designated as commendable. But once you receive that designation, you get those funds for 3 years. So we have access to those resources for 3 years. We're going to take advantage of those. But in order to do that, Ms. Frankowitz and Mr. Rice, and Mr. Reinick is probably involved in this, we need to put a plan together to tell the state, here's kind of how we're going to do that. And a lot of that is going to go towards professional development, support the teachers throughout the school. There was a specific group of students that really triggered that designation, but the nice thing is that we can use those funds to support students across the school. So that's what we're going to do. Kind of talked about all of those things that are on the board. One of the things that's required, though, is that we don't just submit the report or the plan to the state. The Board of Education has to formally approve the plan, which Ms. Frankowitz and Mr. Rice have put together. So they have that, it's ready to go. All we need is the board to formally vote to support the plan, and then we can start to put that plan in process.
Is there a motion to approve the plan? as
So
presented?
moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I saw a couple pages that weren't completely filled in. I just assumed that some of it didn't have to be filled in. For example, key activity 3, there are dates there.
Yeah.
Because some of it stipulates that there is the option to include pages, but some of them it wasn't very, I don't think the form was super user friendly. But is everything that needs to be filled in filled in?
Everything that needs to be filled in is filled in. It's not unusual, just so the board knows, it's not unusual for us to submit what we believe is a complete application or a complete grant, and to get returned because we put the instead of an and, or a variety of other things. Not uncommon to have to redo reports until state board gets just the language that they're looking for. But we believe that everything is in the report that needs to be in the report. Assuming that the board approves it tonight, we'll submit it, and if there's any corrections or additions that need to be made, we'll wait to hear from the state board.
And in this case, this was a template from the state that we used. So download the template, it already had that information, or some of those areas that the left blank just didn't need.
Gotcha, thanks.
So this then is a grant.
Technically, it's a grant, the funds are already committed, so we know we're going to get the funds, we just can't access the funds until we've submitted the grant to tell the state how we're gonna use it.
And there's no obligation to meet or exceed those goals.
No,
I mean, obviously we want to. of course.
Ideally, right, we use these resources to implement some changes, additional support, whatever the case may be, so that students' test scores improve and other metrics improve. It's already happened.
Mhm.
We've already hit that commendable again this year, so we'll continue to monitor those things, and there are measurements, things that we'll monitor that's part of the grant. So we'll do that. If we don't reach, what we're hoping to, it's not like they take the money back or have to pay it back, right? Then there's a question, well, what didn't maybe work? But there's nothing to say that we set the bar here and we're really shooting for up here.
Any other discussion, comments? All right, all in favor?
I,
Aye.
All right. Motion passes. All right. Next item on the agenda is the approval of resolution for at-large board elections. Is there a motion to approve the resolution for elections at large?
So moved.
Second. Moved and second. Any discussion regarding this resolution?
I just wanted to make a comment because I was actually kind of surprised on this topic for me. I've talked to quite a few people who actually didn't vote for this, or voted no against it. And I tried to gauge and understand why. And what's been surprising to me is that most of them, it wasn't an education process of why it's important, but that they understood that and that they wanted they wanted to maintain the process as it was today for representation throughout the city. So that surprised me more than I would have expected. So yeah, just very surprising to me. I won't be supporting it for that reason, because I had quite a few discussions throughout the city that had that point of view, which surprised me.
Interesting. And I encountered a lot of confusion over what this really meant. I heard tales of people thinking that this meant people from Cook County could apply to be on the school board. So there's probably some effort on our part to explain what's going on. Of course, we have at least the current race in the spring is a perfect example of why this would be beneficial to the district, because once again, we have an opening that nobody's running for the school board in the spring, so you'll be left with a school board that's going to get to choose its own members effectively, which we've now done twice in the last 2 years. So being able to allow people that are engaged and want to be on the board to fulfill that role is perhaps better than letting us try and find somebody that meets this criteria and force them on the board, but we'll just see what the voters want.
I guess my comment would be similarly to Eric. I'd like to explain two things. One, that board members still have to reside within the district. That was something that people surprisingly did not realize. And second, what completely lost it. Sorry. But that was the main one. You have to actually live in Sycamore 427 to be on the Sycamore 427 board, regardless of if we have precincts or not. Yeah, and I guess the other one was if we could tell the story that we're experiencing now, that might help. Of this current election and the prior election, we didn't have enough candidates in certain precincts, but we did have enough candidates to be on the board, well, except for unsafe, either way. But there's people out there who want to be on the board that can't be on the board because of this. I think telling that story would help. I'm not sure how to disseminate that information.
It's so difficult, but yeah, I mean, the picture, this race is the perfect picture of it. I mean, or an exaggerated story that if 80 people from the north side of town want to run, and only one person on the south side of town wants to run, the one person can elect themselves, and the 80 will just have to fend over what spots are left. Like, it seems ridiculous that's the process, but, and there's a lot of complications to it. If you move to the other side of town, guess what? You got to give up your seat. Which has happened, yes. Which is how I got on the board, and then how I elect myself back onto the board. This whole thing is a very, very big problem, and I would love to see it go.
One thing I learned at the joint annual conference, there was last year's joint annual conference, not this year's actually, there's a demographer, and they said that in the consolidated elections, the demographics tend to skew older, and this is sort of a generalization, but older people tend to get their news from physical, or are more likely to get their news from a physical newspaper. Have we ever used the Chronicle as a medium to explain sort of district happenings like this instead of Facebook or just on the website, which some members of the community might not access or have the ability to access or the tools?
So we've sent, we send media releases to the Chronicle.
Sure.
They're not obligated to print them. They print a lot of them, but they don't print all of them, right? So we can send information to them and ask them to consider it, but whether or not they print it is totally their decision.
I guess, have districts ever paid to have it printed, or is that unusual or not even allowed?
You could pay to have an ad run
But then I guess
and provide information.
Yeah.
You can't tell people to do it or not to do it.
Yeah.
The only risk would be, the cost of that.
Yeah.
You have residents, taxpayers that.
Sure.
Using my text,
Well, not necessarily the district, but forming a referendum committee essentially. I don't know if there'd be an interest in something like this.
If
I
there's a
would
separate
support
committee
that.
that forms it separate from the district and funds
Yeah.
itself and runs itself, they can do whatever they want.
How would that, could board members form that, or is there, right, it has to be a non,
Yeah.
I guess, do you have any idea how those would start? Because to me, this is an issue I'd like to help solve, but I don't know how if we're not allowed to disseminate information or give an opinion.
Typically, districts, try to identify one or two people who are passionate about it that aren't, on the board, and then they kind of have to take it over, right? It's a matter of identifying who those people are, but then they have to kind of take their reins and run with it.
And I took issue with this the first time we put it on the ballot. I take issue with it again. It's statutory. The language is specific. It has to be there. If this is something clearly that, like, I think the majority of the board wants to do, do we contact Jeff Kiker? Do we contact our state reps to see if there's a way to statutorily expand upon this? Because on the ballot, I mean, getting to your ballot, you're looking at it, you're just seeing this paragraph. You're not getting, if you haven't seen anything in the paper, you haven't seen anything on Facebook, wherever you get news, you don't have a whole lot to expand upon, which is this paragraph. Maybe you don't have any idea what it means, but if that legalese that's in here, I think there's a better way to fix that, just to make it easier for people to understand.
You're welcome to reach out to Representative Kiker or anybody else, yeah.
Or get the state law and such.
Yeah, that's the only way. Right, that's the only way.
I guess, would there be any interest in trying to find people out there that would be willing to campaign for this or contribute to it?
At our
Or is
last
it-
town hall, we had a person come who happened to actually be the board president before Jim Dombeck. His
Yeah.
name was, he came and he spoke in favor of it.
Yeah.
And so he, I know, had some interest, but like Steve was saying, it's a fine line to walk because we can't expend resources as a district to really
Sure,
endorse
sure,
this. So that's where it's like, I think it's a natural inclination as a board member to like want to champion a cause, and so I know like the roundabout had the roundabout that's going in front of North Grove had a group that was spearheaded by somebody I know very well, and it got a lot of success. And it ultimately, the advice that I was given was, if you want to get something done, like you have to have a coalition, and that's that's something, but I don't know that as a board, there's really any vehicle for us to be able to lawfully endorse other than in a vote and in just producing at no cost information related to it. It's just, it's a trying spot with any resolution to that matter, so.
And it could be just a bad road to travel as well. You supported this, but you're not supporting this, you really don't care about that, and
Right.
all that, so.
I guess instead of giving our support, could we help form that coalition? Or is that?
Well, you saw, we gave a
what
nice
this-
resolution to Vision 2030.
Sure.
You know, that was.
Yeah, something like that.
So this is our next resolution,
Yeah,
Alex.
That's about all
Yeah,
the
we're-
tools in our toolkit.
We're putting it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to put it out.
Whereas,
Any other discussion? All right, I'm gonna call a roll call on this. Just 'cause it's more formal.
Jones?
Yes.
Santu?
No.
Shiloh? I'm
Yeah.
sorry, could you say that again?
No.
No. Shiloh?
Yes.
Conkle?
yes.
Evans?
No.
Brados?
Yes.
DeVito?
Yes.
Motion carried.
All right, so the next item on the agenda is the, of these double negatives, approval of the cancellation of the IASB facilitated administrative procedures review. This one, again, I think better to have some explanation first, and then we can decide what the motion should look like.
I'm gonna give a quick 30-second, and I'm gonna turn it over to Alex as chair of the policy committee. So, over the summer, we voluntarily expressed interest in reviewing our administrative procedures, which are documents that the board doesn't approve but support board policies. So those can be useful for the administration to implement board policies in almost every section of the policy manual. So we reached out to IASB, Tim Ying is here from IASB, got that all set up, and then there was kind of a shift in maybe reviewing the policy manual. We reached out to IASB originally because we felt like the policy manual was in a pretty good spot. Some of you may remember last spring, late winter, spring, we did a lot of revisions and updates to the policy manual. So we felt like it was in a good place, and reached out to IASB and started the conversation. Since then, especially this fall, a lot of changes. Kind of the board's taking a different look at the policy manual. And now, one of the things that IASB made really clear, Tammy made this really clear, don't do the administrative procedures review if you're not 100% confident that your policy manual is in a good place, because your administrative procedures are tied to your policy. Policy, you should really make sure is in a good spot first. So, there's been some conversation about investing in the review of the policy manual, customizing the policy manual. The board's gonna do that, will it make sense not to do the administrative procedures review? But I'm gonna stop there and let Alex kind of talk about maybe the desire to do a policy manual customization.
Sure. For this, Tammy, would you mind giving sort of a really brief summary of what the AP project would do, and then highlight what the policy customization project would do?
Sure. I'm director, my name is Tammy, I'm Director of Policy Services from the Illinois Association of School Boards. And so right now, your district is signed on to do an administrative procedures project. If you would like to do that, it starts in January, and it would end in about August. And so how that works in the process for ISB is that we take your current policy manual that's adopted, and then we base the procedures off of that. And then this entire editing process will be with the administration of your district. The board will not be involved in it because the board had already allowed the superintendent to sign onto this project. So there will be no board involvement in that sense. And my understanding from having various meetings or meeting you at JAC as well, that your policy manual may or may not be in the best state as you would like it to be. And so my suggestion is that if you would like assistance from IASB, because we've done everything that you have, all our subscriptions already, the only thing that we can offer you is maybe you would like to do a policy manual customization project with us instead. And so that is much like the AP, as in I would come out and help you guys, but instead of the administration doing it, it's the board, because it's the board doing policy work. So that process would look like it would be up to date with the most current issue of press. And so right now that would be October 2024, issue 117. And then during the process of the customization, I would make sure if there are new issues, you would get those draft updates through me as well. And when you adopt it, you'll be up to date regardless. And assuming you continue your subscription services, basically it's rewriting your manual, but knowing it's going to be up to date with all our samples.
So the policy committee's recommendation would be the same as the administration's recommendation to cancel the administrative procedures project, and it would essentially be a change order to the board policy customization project. But the way IASB would prefer us to do it would be first cancel the administrative procedures project and separately approve engaging with them for the customization, the policy customization project. So that's why there's two separate agenda items, but they're closely related.
And like I said, the reason that I'm here, the reason that we need to have an answer is that I do need an answer with the APs, so that if you're continuing, great, I'm gonna take your manual as is and sort of build off that. I would not be like helping you rewrite your policies in that sense. But if there's anything discrepancies, that I would still give you draft updates for the policies in this process of this APs, okay? You do not need to choose or make a decision if you want to do the customization now. That's, can be a long discussion amongst yourselves, or whenever you come in for your workshop in January, if you have more questions on that. So that answer, you don't have to approve purchasing this, project for customization. I just need an answer for whether you would like to continue APs, which is great, you're on board, you don't need to do anything, or no, you don't want to do anymore, and then we can kind of figure out how to, give you back your money and make sure you're off the contract efficiently. So that's what I need.
Sure.
And I strongly recommend actually to cancel the agreement with IASB to do the administrative procedures project, because the policy manual is kind of in a state of flux. Whether the board decides to engage with IASB in policy customization is really a board decision.
And regardless, there's not any financial impact to back out of the contract.
Right.
It won't cost the district anything. They'll get a refund for whatever may or may not have been paid.
Right. You will get your refund because you did not do the project, so.
And I understand there's a wait list for these.
Yes, for the AP projects, because every district's on the same timeline, so we have 4 directors for policy services, and we work with 10 districts, but everyone's on the same timeline, so everyone starts in January, everyone ends in August, and there's only one program to run that first draft manual, and all the editing meetings happen in the same time period. That is the AP project the biggest difference is that AP project has a stricter timeline, because those dates are set in the contract. A customization, that timeline is fluctuating between whenever you start your project, because you can sign on in any month. It doesn't have to be January through August. It could be any time. You can start in December through whatever. You can have that at any time. There is a wait list because every year we only take 10, at least right now. So you guys were secured a spot because you had returned a signed contract. You were one of the first 10 to return a signed contract this year. So the process in the future, if you were so inclined to do an AP project in the future, when your policy manual is more set in stone, or you're more satisfied with that, the process probably will be much similar unless you redesign it, and there would be a webinar late summer, and then again, the request of a contract is first come, first serve. When you sign it, you return it back, first come, first serve, and then you would secure your spot in the next one. The only prerequisite for APs is that you have to be on Press Plus. So assuming you do or do not do this customization, retain having Press Plus, or else you wouldn't qualify to do the AP project in the future.
Thank you. So, did you have anything else?
No, with that, I move to approve the cancellation of IASB's facilitated administrative procedures review.
Second.
And second, any discussion? All right, seeing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, so we canceled that project. Next item on the agenda is the approval to engage the IASB Policy Services in Board Policy Manual Customization Project. The recommended action is to approve to engage IASB Policy Services in Board Policy Manual Customization. If no motion is made, the item would die and we would do nothing. And the recommended motion is to approve the policy services and board policy manual customization from the administration. So with this, I'm going to, again, given the nature of this item being somewhat nuanced, there's just a little explanation, maybe a preface before we host a motion. We've got a slide up here.
Yeah, so the board has chosen to not do the administrative procedures project. So Tammy really got the big answer that she was looking for and got some guidance there. This one really is board preference. You know, the board's engaged our attorneys in reviewing some of the policies already. IESB's review is pretty comprehensive. They will review the entire 400-page policy manual and customize it so that it's exactly what the board wants. Alan's term earlier was, I think, really good. Hard reset. There's a hard reset on the policy manual so that the board knows exactly what's in it. I think there's value in that, but really whether or not the board wants to engage in that process is up to the board. One of the things we talked about while we were taking your picture, I had this question for Tammy, just wanted to clarify, and as she said earlier, this one the board doesn't have to engage in it. There's a policy workshop coming up in January, or it could go through that policy workshop and then decide whether or not it wants to engage in it afterwards, because the timeline on this is not as strict as the administrative procedures one. You could start it at any point, March, July, September, whatever. Truly the board's decision on this.
So with that information, I'll also just add some additional context before we host a motion that the policy committee has been working through a whole series of policies for revision, and a lot of this work, I think, has been related to what this could be. And so I guess I'd just turn and ask if the policy chair and the policy committee has a recommendation on this. I know you guys didn't have a ton of time before this meeting to come to that conclusion, so just more or less, if there are any individual comments then from the policy committee on this, that would be super helpful.
Personally, I have enough information to feel comfortable recommending that we move forward. But if the board would like additional information, I'd be happy to wait as well. But I would support moving forward with this tonight.
Are there any other comments from the policy committee related to that? Again, only on the basis that in the time allotted, there wasn't enough to reach full consensus or discussion of that.
I trust your judgment on it, but what is the cost? What would be the cost?
$9,350, I believe. Right? Does that sound
That's
right?
it. That's
Yeah.
it. And that was, the price is per student, it's the size of the district, whether it's administrative procedures or the policy manual review. So it's the exact same, you know, we've already dedicated those funds to the administrative procedures project. If the board doesn't do either one, ISB will cut us a check back. We had to make a down payment to commit to it. If the board decides to do the policy manual review, customization, the down payment is essentially already made, like Alex said, to change orders. We're just shifting it from one project to another.
And if we were to try to do it ourselves, then what is the cost? Like the lawyer fees to make sure we're in compliance? Are we better off paying them financially?
Yeah, just from a cost perspective, it's
Okay.
cheaper. That doesn't mean they don't do a good job. They do a great job.
Right,
but
right,
it's cheaper
right.
than having an attorney
Thank
do
you.
it, Yeah.
Yeah, then I support it as well. If it's gonna save money,
But
save
if
the
I
district money.
If I overheard the conversation earlier correctly, they will provide legal advice as to whether those policies are legally compliant. Is that correct?
Well, make sure I get this right, Tammy. Their legal team vets policies prior to being presented to the board, right? So are they in line with state statute, school code? If the board wants to customize something and is looking for a recommendation in terms of what language to use, they will not provide that. That's something that we would need to talk to our attorneys about. Is that accurate?
So I'm gonna answer a couple questions here. I don't know how financially well it is for your, I don't know, your billable hours to your attorney. So that being said though, all the school law attorneys in the state subscribe to press. So when they're looking for information, their first mode of action is to look on press and look at their footnotes, and they're using our material but billing you. So like, you might as well cut the middleman and come to the source. Personal hot take, but that's the opinion there. The second part about, do we give recommendations? So, for example, like if we had a policy that didn't have a time limit for like public speaking or something, right? We have, we don't have that, but we'll say like, hey, if you would like to limit that, you can. However, there are suggestions that you don't go under 20 because of X, Y, and Z. If you do it less than 20, consult your board attorney. Like we would tell you if something is flagged as not the best mode of branding. Everything that we write, everything that's produced, actually goes through a strenuous process. Our press editors obviously are all attorneys. We also have a PAB review, a press advisory board review, which goes to whoever wants to be on it willingly, which a lot of it are school law attorneys who will be using our policies as examples or basing their knowledge off of it as well, would give suggestions and stuff prior to a press issue even being released. If there's anything of concern or like, something has to be reported to ISB, but ISB doesn't have a system yet, our attorneys are in contact with ISB asking them like, hey, is this actually happening or is this not? It's effective on July 1st, however, your system isn't in place until September. Do you still want to write it that way? But our attorneys, our press editors are in contact with all these, like we have a source, we don't just make things up and write it. We also have a governmental relations department that monitors bills, and we get suggestions from other attorneys of how to support, which bills we support versus not. So anything that's published on press online, our samples, we are responsible of our own samples. We are very confident in its legislative compliance in that sense. When the board edits whatever they do, if I know, I will look at all the footnotes and make sure that there isn't any suggestion of keeping a certain thing or not keeping anything, or if anything is legally required to be in policy, or something's legally required but not necessary to be in policy. I would tell you those suggestions, that's for sure. The thing that I won't do is I cannot write it for you. So I do give recommendations, and like sometimes your policies say superintendent or designee, right? And if I know like a policy is best practice not to write or designee, I'll tell you, it's not best practice is not to put or designee. But if it's your choice that you guys do decide to do it, then it's on you. Because once the board adopts a manual, that is the board's responsibility. We're no longer like liable with what your language is. So during the process, I will be involved in all of that. I can look up things, I can ask our press editor things, I can see what is recommended, what is not, what is best practice, but I cannot write it for you. I will just give you the suggestion like, best practice is not to do something. The board decides to do it, I mean, that's your call. If it's legally questionable, that's up to you too. You would make sure your board attorney's on board with everything, because if anything is triggered, your board attorney is who's defending you. So if your board attorney suggests something and you trust that board attorney, that is the language that you should be doing, because they're the ones who will need to uphold whatever the policy says. So that's that part of the question.
I guess I'm a little confused, but I would defer to the recommendation of the policy committee. I just don't understand exactly what this accomplishes versus our current press subscription, our months-long so far rehashing of what's in there and uncovering all that. I just don't know what this does for us specifically.
And on that note, I mean, a lot of work has been done already. A lot of time has been put into this process already. We have a workshop coming up where I think a lot of the things that we may want to accomplish can be done through that workshop as opposed to this. So I would be in favor of continuing the course of the process we started, maybe tweaking some things with the workshop, but then maybe tabling this for next year, because I don't want to jeopardize any of the PA at all. I want to make sure that that eventually does get done. And it sounded like, based off of, correct me if I'm wrong, if we're taking off of Press Plus while we're doing this, that could jeopardize us getting the PA next year if we wanted to try it next year.
So PA is what?
Community procedures.
Oh, okay.
AP,
Okay.
sorry, I'm mixing.
Oh, sorry, I was like, is there a public act I'm not aware of, so I just needed to know. So, let's see, what was the question? Okay. So, yes, so I just want to touch base with press. I've had meetings with, I've had a meeting with the superintendent and your reporting secretary in September. I had a in-person meeting with your board president at the Joint Allen Conference, and I had a 45-ish minute meeting on Friday with Alex. So separately speaking with you guys, I kind of have been, and also I spoke to Laura Martinez, your outreach and training director from ISB. So I kind of have a picture of kind of what's going on, or like what your concerns are. So I can see that. So my analogy that I gave Mr. DeVito was that what you're doing right now is kind of patching your policy manual, and it's a fantastic way to do it. You're willing to do it. You have people who are willing to dedicate this time, and passionate about it, care about it, and that is a method that works. I agree. But if you're saying that, oh, I don't know if I missed anything during this process, well, I don't know either, right? As a person who works at ISB, who is a policy director, like I wouldn't know either, because you also already had a complimentary quality assurance review from my department head back in February as well. So we've done all the measures that we can provide for you, and you are subscribed to everything that we can possibly offer for you. So if you're looking for assistance from us about what's legally required versus what is not, other than hard resetting it, there's really no mechanism that I can do to help you if you want ISB's help in that sense. So why would you want to rewrite it, basically? Because if you rewrite it now, or whenever, if you do the policy manual customization project, which is, I don't care either way if you do it or not, the process is the same. It is, you will be provided with, it is rewriting your manual, so it's replacing your current one. It is going to be, you will be provided with the most up-to-date press updates. So everything from press, in my standpoint, is legally compliant, and it has been, fine-tuned and tweaked based on all the advice that we get from ISB, all the advice that we get from school law attorneys. So it is written to be legally compliant in and of itself. So if you don't trust that part of press, then maybe you should be employing outside attorney, even beyond your board attorney. You should maybe apply, if that's a concern, a big concern for you about compliance, because they do base off their knowledge off of press as well. They are all subscribers to press. So the cleanest way, if you want to know if you're compliant legally speaking, is that if you have press, you are legally compliant. You should be. In the basics of the samples, you would be. So that's why, if that's a concern about being legally compliant, having all the language that you need, then that would be the easiest basic way to know that you will be at least up to date to the most current issue. Is that the only way to do it? No. Is press the only way to do that, accomplish that? Also no. You can be paying billable hours to an attorney to do it, but that means that that attorney is using our resource. So they're starting off with our resource, and then they're going to make edits to that resource and then charging you. Is probably what will happen. Is it worth it? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. That's up to the district's call if you think that is the better method. I know you've dedicated, a duration of time doing this already, so if you want to continue it, I completely see why that is a very valid option to do so. So there's no rush in how doing a customization. You can do that at any time at a point. If you were to do it, the logistics is what you had brought up, which is the subscription of Press Plus would be paused during duration. So the reason of that is because there could only be one working draft going on at a go. So usually you get draft updates on your Press Plus dashboard. We would no longer be providing those Press Plus updates on the dashboard because you were getting the Press Plus updates through me. So if you do sign on for the contract, your subscription for Press Plus will be paused. And then your school board policies online subscription will continue. So that means public viewing, public facing, those policies are still viewable, they're still standing, but you are having draft, or your working version is the one with me, which would be a PDF during the duration of the project. So at the conclusion of the project, that PDF, the Word documents, replace everything that's in your Press Plus, assuming you sign up for Press Plus again. So that's the biggest difference. And during this duration, if it takes 6 months or how many months during the customization, and you want to update your policy manual public facing, you can still do so. You would just take the Word version, you could download the Word version on your school board policies online, make the edits that you want, then send them to me, and then I upload it onto the website. You just don't have the editing mode access available for your recording secretary.
Quick question to the policy committee. How much more time do you think you would need to be able to finish the work that we've started in terms of reviewing the list of potential policy issues and then applying the legal opinion in terms of statutory requirement and what's not statutorily required? How much time do you think that will take?
Wasn't that legal opinion just on the list you provided, not all of our policies?
That's correct.
I mean, based on that, I'd say we're about 20% of the way.
I thought our current policies were based on press.
They are.
Yes.
We did this
So
in
kind
2008. In 2008, we did the hard reset. So, and since then, we've been relying on Press Plus.
Yes.
Right. I'm just assuming that if Press Plus is updating our policies, then doing a hard reset gives us the same policies, just allowing us to go in and tweak some of them, which is the process we're going through right now, of reviewing everything, going, do we like this, do we want to make a change? It's like, that's where I'm still stuck in understanding what the hard reset actually does, if our policy should already be up to date with current Press Plus language.
It doesn't take into account any decisions that were made back in 2008. So if they wanted to deviate from the recommended language at some point back in '08, which we found based on the most recent opinion that was the case, Press Plus wouldn't give an opinion on that.
And a solution to that is that we, come January at the workshop, establish a schedule that we monitor all of our policies on either a 1-year or 2-year basis beyond just the press updates. And that could just as well give an opportunity for us to do the same thing effectively. Am I wrong in that?
I mean, it would just shift essentially the work would fall on the policy committee as opposed to getting assistance from ISB, but the same task would be completed.
And we should still, and this
Sure,
will be
we
something
should-
in January, we should
yeah.
still do the other thing I just described.
Yeah, we would still do the review, but if we don't engage this, we'd do a review and potential revisions along with the review continuously. Whereas if we fill out the questionnaire, get the policy manual how we want it, we would just review to make sure we're following it, but we wouldn't have to sit there and look at the alternative language and determine if it was selected back in 2008, if local language was written back in 2008, or whatever. It would be this board's call what the policies are.
I think there might be value, we're not under the gun to make the decision
No.
this evening. That meeting that we have, the training that Tim's gonna do in January might be very enlightening as to where we stand, deficiencies that we may or may not have, or maybe we're in a much better state than we believe. And maybe we table until sometime after that, maybe the meeting after, or discussion at that training to say, this is a great idea, we should move forward, or we're in better shape than we think, or some other solution that we can find.
And I would support that, Alan, but just for clarification, so really what we would be vetting is the language that we, or a board, had opted to change from 2018 to now. Or 2008 to now. We're basically double checking the work that was chosen by, or the words that were selected by boards through that. That's the part of the
That's a good way
question.
to put it.
It
So
was
then-
more of back in 2008 because subsequent boards had their policy revisions based on that language, and we've come to find that that language wasn't necessarily compliant with statute.
That was
or
my
best practice.
understanding, that the problem was we weren't in some areas legally compliant.
And it wasn't.
Correct.
But that board selected that language based on some attorney's opinion.
Maybe.
Right.
Maybe they just wanted it. I don't know. We don't know that.
But then, isn't this an ever-going cycle of rechecking boards' work forever?
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
at what point do we
That's
draw a
what
line
I'm
in the sand and say, hey, look, we are gonna do it this way?
Yep.
We've made this selection, we're gonna live with that.
Mhm.
Until somebody tells us we shouldn't, or there is something glaring here. It just seems like, what's the end here? There is no end. It's just now, 2 years from now, we go back and we're second-guessing what this board decided, and so on and so forth, forever.
And the mechanism that IASB has isn't one that we have to use, but is effectively having policy maintenance done on a recurring basis by the policy committee. And like, what we've been doing is using, and it's been fine, it's been working somewhat okay for us, is the press updates has been our like maintenance. But what you'll come to find with the workshop in January is one of the IASB tools that they have, Tammy stopped me here, is the monitoring of policy mechanisms that IASB suggests, which are fairly detailed, and we may not want to adopt something as detailed as that, but they give a really nice routine for us to, on an ongoing basis, take care of our policy beyond just the press updates, that if we're patient, could very well accomplish the same thing that this policy manual customization would do, but to Alex's point, would require patience and more time from individual members.
Sure.
by adopting it. But the problem too is, like to Alan's point, is we don't know what that is yet. You're only hearing folklore of Michael speaking of some grandeur thing that should come at this workshop. So I certainly think it would be worthwhile, since there's interest in knowing more, to wait until after that workshop, so that way the board can work on that.
Let's go ahead.
Is there any ask from me or the policy committee on some sort of report as to how much more we'd have to review?
I don't think there's an end goal for me there. It's really just understand it sounds to me like there's two approaches. Start with virgin press policy and compare that to what our current one is to figure out what got changed and if we want to keep those changes. Or start with our current policy and look at virgin press and figure out why it's different and whether we want to revert back to the other. Both of those sound like the same level of effort to me.
But the
So-
difference is ISB would help with one and they wouldn't help with the other.
Okay, but
That's-
same amount of effort
yeah,
on our
sure.
part potentially. That's where I guess I'm deferring to the policy committee if it's gonna be, your guys' time, and you think one of those is gonna be 50% more efficient for you. But for me, the cost is not the biggest deal of this.
That's how I interpreted this. If we do the one with ISB, it would be more
It
efficient.
just still seems to me like you're hand walking through every single policy, having to make all these same decisions that we're making right now anyway.
Well, I guess, could you give a little more on how the questionnaire process works and then
I think,
we might not have
and I
to do all
just,
that,
before
or-
we get down too
Or is
much
that
of a
just-
rabbit hole,
okay.
I think there seems like, again, appetite to just postpone this.
Sure.
So I think that's probably a good route. So if nobody
Yeah.
makes a motion on this, it'll die. We don't have to actually
Sure.
motion to postpone it. And then why don't we just wait until after the workshop, and then at that next, at the onset of that, we can kind of brainstorm an action plan. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah, I just think that
Yes.
topic would be an excellent, the workshop would be a great venue for that,
I agree. I think that's perfect.
that
So-
conversation.
Awesome. So that's everything on this agenda. There's no motion then? Perfect. Okay. Then is there a motion to go into executive session for consideration of matters related to the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call.
Coughlin,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Grados,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Santu,
Yes.
Shiloh,
Yes.
DeVito,
Yes.
motion carried.
In like,
That'll be next March.
12:15.
Wow.
All right, we're now in open session and we stand adjourned.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.